Hello and welcome to the Being Human podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Bottaro, and today I've got an awesome episode to share with you, an awesome guest, somebody I've had on the show before, Bri Edwards, who's the author of the book 1,000 Pounds. She was telling her story about losing her son, and what a heart-wrenching story when her little boy passed away. But she turned it into a beautiful story of suffering turned into grace. And now the work she's doing in healing and helping people is really beautiful. But that's not what we're talking about today. It's actually an incredibly amazing thing that happened that is still mind-blowing. I still don't know how to make sense of this. And in this episode, we open up a lot more questions than are necessarily answered. But I really like that. In fact, I kind of make that the point as we're talking through this really crazy miracle that has happened very recently. And so I don't want to give away too much because it's a really special episode opening this up. But I will say this. We have a history in the church and a tradition of seeing supernatural graces and miracles of incorruptibility. And so something that has never happened, at least as far as I understand it, in the history of the world, the history of our church, has happened. And we still have to figure out how to make sense of it, but we're going to talk about that. I hope this blesses you. Bri is an amazing person. I've gotten to know her over the years, and in her work with her son's name is Lachlan, and it's Locke's Legacy is the name of her nonprofit. So please check it out. Links are in the show notes as always. And we talk here about grieving. We talk about conversions. We talk about understanding the church. If things are coming up for you during this episode, please reach out. We give free consultations for people who feel like they might need a little help, somebody to talk to about going a little deeper in some of these things. This is not directly about grief or loss or things like that, but they come up and you never know. So I just always like to make sure people know that. CatholicPsych.com/mentorship is where we offer those free consultations. But check out lockslegacy.org. And also what we talk about today in the show notes in the episode will be in the show notes. So I really do hope you check that one out. God bless you. I spent the last 10 years learning how to help people using the best techniques available in psychology integrated with the Catholic faith. Now we've figured out that there's a better way to help people than just slapping a Catholic label on the same secular model of therapy you find anywhere else. The real question is, how will we make this shift to a new model of truly Catholic accompaniment, keeping the psychological sciences in mind while opening up to a more human and more effective approach? This podcast is here to give you the answer. Join me and follow along as I take you behind the scenes of what this new model looks like, using recorded audio from sessions working with my team, with colleagues, and even directly with clients. My name is Dr. Greg Bottaro, and I want to welcome you to the Being Human podcast. All right, here we are. Welcome back.
Thank you.
It's
excited to be
great
here.
to have
Get
you
to
back
share the
here,
story.
and I can't wait to see where, often I've had guests back for other episodes before, usually to talk about things maybe fairly similar to the original. It's usually somebody's like an expert in one thing. With you and your story and what you're sharing here, it's like an incredible sequel that like a new book is being written. And the first was actually your book and your whole story of Locke's legacy. And here we are taking this crazy turn into a whole new phase of what God is doing in your life. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to hear more about what's been going on.
I'm so excited to be able to tell you. It's been a phenomenal just like showing. This is God's story that I feel like I get to be just a front row witness to seeing what he's got in store.
Well, I guess briefly, just as an update in terms of, if somebody hasn't heard our first episode yet, what got you started with Catholic Psych, and sort of the first part of your story.
Well, I felt like that was almost a miraculous godsend too. I had been writing a book. It was a story of my loss and my way kind of through that journey of grief, and was just to the point in writing my manuscript of like, okay, now what does it look like to find a publisher? And while I was sitting one day with the Headspace app they had a mindful grieving segment in there. And as I was like spending some time with that, I had this like idea pop in my head, like, you know, what would be amazing is if we had something with grief and God and mindfulness all in one. I should reach out to Dr. Greg. And so, on a complete whim, I sent you this email and just to kind of throw that idea out. And actually, I was talking to my brother about it afterward that I sent you this email, and he kind of giggled and said, like, go big, I guess. And like, okay. And sure enough, you replied. And little by little, asked for some of what I was writing. And then you were just in the process of launching this Catholic Psych Publishing Press and were willing to take on the story. And so it became.
So yeah, and the story, of course, of losing your son and what that was like. The book called £1,000, a beautiful book that came of that project, and a fruit of so much prayer and suffering offered up, and really a beautiful movement of resources and support for parents who are grieving the loss of children, and of course all the wonderful work you're doing with Locke's Legacy, and so much there to unpack. But what that brought you to was, you said you were invited to give a talk. Is that right? Bring us now maybe a little bit more up to speed for what
Yeah.
does this next volume look like?
Yeah. So this next volume actually started because of this book. So being that I was an author and with the nonprofit that I have, the parish that I grew up in was hosting a Sisterhood of Mary luncheon to honor all of the women of the parish who, are the hands and feet of God in so many different ways. And they invited me to come give a talk for this luncheon, which then was, of course, focused around grief and loss, and especially how the service of those women, not only were they tending to me and to us while I was grieving, but they were also teaching me at the same time how to serve other people. And so, really, like the whole ministry, like everything from Locke's Legacy and from the book, is all essentially paying it forward from all of the people that met us in our sorrow and showed me what helps and how to meet people where they're at. Anyway, so that's I was there, I gave that talk, and this new story begins right after that talk. So of course you tell a story like that, and a lot of people will want to come up and tell you their experiences of loss and the things that they're working through. And I had a woman that approached and she said, I don't know, I just felt inspired to come tell you my story too. And she told me the story then of her baby. It was her firstborn son that was born in 1982. It was a traumatic delivery, so he was kind of swept away pretty quick after delivery for resuscitation efforts. Lived for about 42 minutes, 43, I think, before he passed away. And so his parents were military at the time. They were in Fort Knox. And knowing that that wasn't going to be home long term, they decided to have him buried in Highmore, South Dakota, where Dad's family, extended family, is from. And then fast forward 37 years later, parents have now retired from the military. They've moved out to the Black Hills. They've decided that they want to be buried one day in the Black Hills National Cemetery, and so decided to have baby Brian, their son, reinterred from Highmore out to Black Hills National Cemetery. And in that process, they were told, yes, that's possible, but being an infant-sized casket in an adult-sized grave, it's possible for the equipment to damage the casket, and we'd have to replace that if that happened. And so, sure enough, in that process, the casket was damaged. And when they opened it, they found him completely incorrupt, just as beautiful as the day they laid him to rest the first time. And so that's like, I'm hearing the story from this woman I've never met, and like, it's busy and what? And so she kindly, like, there was a line of people kind of waiting to talk to me. So she kindly stepped away and like, do you have a picture of that? I don't, and she's like, yeah. And so that's, I snuck away to go meet her and like, would you be willing to send me that picture? Like, it's remarkable. Like, this baby is like rosy colored. He looks like a sleeping baby. And my, like, I was speechless. Asking her like, well, have you told people about this story? And she said, yeah. And have you told a priest about this story? And she said, yeah. Okay. Um, and so I left just like it, there's so much awe. Um, it's almost hard. Like, it took me a while to figure out even what to think about it. But it was like, we know of our incorrupt saints, and looking at this perfectly preserved baby who had died 37 years before it almost felt like seeing a miracle, or a Eucharistic miracle, where it's a like visible sign of this invisible truth that we know. Like, for me and my baptized baby, like, I've always known and been able to trust that he was in heaven, and I've been able to ask for his intercession for lots of things through the years. But to see this witnessed in this like physical, tangible way was just so profound. And then
Yeah,
knowing,
there's I gotta slow you down for 1 second because there's just too much. There's
I
so much
know,
here,
and
and
we
and
barely
so
started.
okay, so I know we haven't even gotten started. So the mom goes to give birth to the hospital, 1983, young woman. There's a traumatic birth experience. Baby is rushed away, and baby dies, and
Hmm.
within 45 minutes,
Hmm.
and is buried. Parents grieve, and this is like 40 years ago at this point. So 2020, they decide to reinter, so they have to dig up the casket and move where the baby was buried almost 40 years ago to the new place that they're actually thinking now, because they're older, about their own grave site, about their own final resting place, and they want to have their baby from almost 40 years ago with them where their final resting place is going to be. And then so that there's a company that does this, and I imagine there's big equipment digging into the ground. And if it's a tiny little casket, it's hard to know. It's probably not one of those big metal, you know, adult-sized caskets that we're used to seeing. It gets damaged. They have to do some work, and they figure out that this baby is inside this almost 40-year-old casket, incorrupt. Now, this is a huge thing. I mean, first of all, there's so many questions that people should be thinking. If you know anything about anything, first of all, if you don't know anything about anything with the Catholic Church and the weirdness of some of this stuff, it's like, wow, yeah, we've got some really weird stuff. And incorrupt saints itself is a super weird thing. And, I've traveled around a lot, and I've seen a lot of incorrupt saints in different places in Europe, and some of them are kind of a stretch. And you see some of these incorrupt saints and you're like, that doesn't look too incorrupt to me. I don't know. And then there's some weird experiences where there's certain parts of a saint's body that will be incorrupt while the rest of the body has corrupted. And there's all these different rules and canon law and all these ideas about like what makes it supernatural. And then of course there are experiences, and I've heard rebuttals to this too, where there are non-Catholic other experiences of kind of like mummification and preservation that happens, and depending on humidity and pressure and all different kinds of environmental conditions, then there could be a sort of slowing down of the decaying process that happens to the human body. Okay, all that being said, and I want to kind of jump ahead to one of the craziest things I think about this whole. I mean, again, there's so many pieces to this that they're all crazy. But I read you have a website, and what is it, Baby Brian? What's the website again?
babybrian.org.
Babybrian.org, and you've got all the
Which,
data.
yeah, so I would fully encourage anybody listening to go look at the pictures. Like mom and dad got to do a radio interview a few months after they had this reinterment, and I just like I couldn't believe that it was not worldwide news. Why don't
Well,
people
it's
know
it's
about this?
almost too much to make sense of this, because I think what's really important is on babybrian.org you have the witness testimonies of morticians and funeral directors, right? And people giving expert witness testimony to examining this baby, and there being not only sort of like the oddity of a lack of decomposition, but a scientifically impossible situation of and I won't give away the details because you can talk more about it. But also, I want people to go to the website. But there's very specific things that necessarily happen, especially with babies, that we find in this particular instance not happening,
Mhm.
and completely anomalous, as far as I understand, in the entire history of the world. I mean, this is anomalous in the entire history of the world on like every level of this story. So we have a baby. So the parent. So the reason why I'm giving a little bit of this up front is because I'm so curious. Like, what is this woman like who comes to you and says, "Let me tell you my story"? What was her disposition? How, like, what is she saying to you? How is she saying telling you her story? Like, what does
Yeah.
she think about all this?
I think that's one of the most profound things about it is she is very peaceful. She was coming to share with us, knowing that it's a story of hope for bereaved parents. So her only desire was to share this story of hope with me. And even as I started like recognizing that this would be a story of hope for so many bereaved parents um, across the world, and like asking her what she thought about sharing this story. And it's not, she's just got this beautiful openness. It's not something that she was necessarily seeking or desiring. She and her husband have prayed about it for a long time. So it's been 5.5 years. It was late 2019 when this reinterment was done. And they, that whole time, have felt like it was maybe for more than just them, but never really knowing what to do with it and not necessarily feeling inspired to try to push that themselves. Um, she noted after we met that her daughter-in-law, just 2 weeks before we met. So no, again, it's been 5.5 years since they found this. It's not new. They've been kind of pondering that in their hearts for a long time. And just 2 weeks before we met, her daughter-in-law made a point to reach out to her and encourage Mary Pat, Brian's mom, to pray about what they should be doing with Brian's story. Um, yeah. And so just it had come up for them again too, to be praying about what God is wanting to reveal in this story. Uh, and so they've
I
just
mean, when
been
you say
very open
when
and
you say that
compliant.
there's it's when your analogy to a Eucharistic miracle is really profound, and I don't think that can be overstated. That you sent me these pictures when I first saw them, I was blown away. Like, you see a mom holding her newborn baby, except the mom is probably like, what is she? How old is Mary Pat? 65, 70? Like, she's probably in her
Yeah, I mean,
60s, right?
her other grown children got to come and be part of this. So, I mean, yeah, she's a grandma by the time that she's getting to hold her baby again.
Yeah, so you see this old woman like a grandma, and older. I'm not trying to be
Yeah.
politically incorrect here, but it's so striking because you see a grandma holding a newborn baby, and you're like, oh, that's really cute granddaughter or grandson, and then you're like, wait, that's the son who died 40 years ago, and it's this baby looks like he's sleeping, and it's like a Eucharistic miracle that if you see a real Eucharistic miracle, it's not like these miracles when they're like you can kind of sort of make out the face of Jesus because of the way the light is shining into the Eucharist. Like you've seen those miracles, those are Eucharistic miracles. You're like kind of sort of maybe okay. I'm kind of piecing it together here if I look at it from a certain angle. No. Real Eucharistic miracles with, not to say that some of those aren't real, but the ones where the Eucharist turns into flesh and blood those are meant to pull back the veil of this supernatural reality that we believe by faith, and then God gives us this little moment where it's undeniable that you can see it now, and it's scientifically unexplainable. I think that's an amazing analogy for what happens looking upon this picture of this baby and the reality of this baby having been 40 years incorrupt to this extent, which is scientifically unexplainable in any way, shape, or form. And so you have this woman who's holding this let's call it Eucharistic miracle of her child's incorrupt nature and state, and she's just holding that like peacefully, humbly. Didn't really do anything. That happened in 2020. Now it's 25. And how long ago did you give this talk? Did she actually come up to you?
The end of March. So it's only been
Okay,
like
so
3 months since I learned this story. Yeah.
you sent me those pictures. You must have been right after you uh, actually learned about this.
Yeah.
And another crazy connection here being my work. So you're out in Rapid City, and I've been out there, and I've been getting more involved with some of the sort of more saint causes and things like that with the work of Nicholas Black Elk. So that's another weird intersection here. We won't get too deep into that right now, but it was literally a week after I was asked to be part of the investigation for his cause that you sent me this other thing. And maybe they're totally disconnected, but I don't know. I'm still waiting to make some. I think there's going to be maybe some connections here. But either way, this baby's getting moved to the Black Hills to be reinterred, or it has been reinterred there, and all these pieces are coming together. So, what questions does this open up? Let's maybe go there.
Well, so for me, like being a science person too, I work in medicine. Like I came away thinking like that level of preservation is insane. But it's more reasonable to think that there would be some sort of science behind that, like some natural explanation, than to immediately jump to the conclusion that this is miraculous. So I came home and spent all weekend studying all of these like forensic questions that I had. And the more I studied, the more I'm finding like, but none of those fit this case. And even a baby's body being a higher percent body water and bones that even aren't completely ossified, like you would expect an infant's body to decompose more rapidly than even an adult body. And so that's, after I spent my weekend doing this, and I'd send a few follow-up questions to Mary Pat here and there, and she just very kindly like answered my questions and was willing to engage in the conversation, which I thought was very generous of this woman who doesn't know me from Adam. Um, and then the following week, I called some friends who work in the funeral home, and like, what am I missing? Like, can you explain why or how this could have happened? And they too just like, once I sent the pictures, I started getting well, sometimes embalming will preserve a body for longer than we expect it might. And like, no, but this was 37 years, and let me send you this picture. And as soon as she saw the picture, she's like, let me go ask some more people, and got off the phone immediately and called me back a few minutes later and was like, yeah, no, that's not normal. And even so, he had an autopsy as well. And that's one of the things that even Brian's parents, have heard repeatedly from funeral directors, that the fact that he had an autopsy and still looked that good, just adds to the awe of what's happened there. When I was talking to Tiffany, the funeral director that actually took care of him during the reinterment, she was amazing, and she was still in awe and could recall all of the details of that with a lot of clarity, considering it had been 5.5 years. She said, in your career, she's been doing this for a long time. There's going to be a few cases that stand out to you forever, and this will be one of them. And I will never forget this baby, and I will never forget this family. And she could talk me through a lot of what she saw, and even, questions like some of the things that really stood out to her. The autopsy incisions not being dried out, in that she said, she talked to some of her coworkers. I was asking her, like, what percentage of autopsy incisions are dried out before burial? And she said, yeah, I asked around my coworkers what they thought too, and it's almost 100%. And baby Brian had none of that. And, she said the rest of his body, his fingertips, his torso, his legs, his toes, all of it was just perfect. When I was first studying that picture too, I was like, wow, maybe the funeral director was exceptional with cosmetics. Like, really, he shouldn't have the skin integrity to be able to do anything with that. But she said, no, he didn't need anything. Like, that's how he looked. She said, out of kindness and just a motherly tenderness, they gently washed his body. The blanket and the gown were soiled, like dirt fell on it when the casket was broken. And so they were able to take the blanket off and the gown off and gently wash those and replace them. She said everything in there was completely dry. So that you talk about moisture as being a key factor in the decomposition of a body. And while the casket is sealed, so theoretically you shouldn't really have any moisture from the outside coming in, you still have moisture from the body itself, and those cells should break down and release moisture into this sealed casket. And she said everything was completely dry. It was just remarkable to hear her talk about all of those details. She said those tiny little fingertips. She said we have a hard time keeping adult fingertips looking good until their burial. And here he is 37 years later, and they still look just fine. His nail beds were just a little bit purple, and that's about the only thing that you see that is not like a completely pink normal baby, and the autopsy scars.
I mean, is there any way in which, if it's like perfectly airtight, air sealed, does that stop the decomposing process?
Yeah, it would be interesting to be able to do like a full scientific investigation. Like, there are extremely rare circumstances of a perfect embalming in a perfect environment, and soil conditions and pH that are just right, that will lead to a preservation that is more than you might expect. But as far as like from everything that you can see on the surface, that none of those factors really apply in his case.
And I mean, it would have been amazing to even. I mean, it sounds like it would be more remarkable to even bury him originally. I mean, I would imagine his that if he already didn't start going through that process, it might have been even a kind of an anomaly to bury him. He must have looked pretty good. Maybe he became better over time. I don't know, but I would imagine, like, even however many days after actual death, like, I wonder if there's any actual
Yeah, and
anyone who remembers.
I don't remember hearing anybody say anything that there was anything startling or alarming. There are some comparison pictures on that website too. Mary Pat, Brian's mom, wasn't sure she really wanted pictures, but her mother-in-law, with that little more distance, thought, that might be something that she would want to have someday. also took some pictures of Brian before he was buried initially in 1982. So they're old, like grainy 1982 photos. But it's neat to be able to do the comparison of the two, and the photos from 2019. I mean, between photo quality and equipment and the look of the baby, like the 2019 pictures look better than the original ones.
Yeah, wow. That's so fascinating. Okay, so let's just say then that this is a supernatural miracle, and there's no scientific explanation, no natural explanation that can make sense of how this can happen. So then we can believe in supernatural explanations for things. So this is some presumably act of God, and so then that seems like that then opens up a whole another hallway of doors and questions and all different paths to go down. I mean, typically the incorruptibles, the saints who are found to be preserved, have led a life of exemplary virtue, and a lot of times as part of the actual canonization sort of consideration, and we have people who live these exemplary lives. When I was a friar, I recently had Father Columba CFR on the podcast, and we were reminiscing about time at the Most Blessed Sacrament Friary in Newark, New Jersey. When the friars took over that place, it was a group of nuns that had lived there for, I don't know, 150 years. And when they were switching out the caskets to bring them to a burial ground for the religious order, one of the caskets was heavier than all the other ones. And it turns out that there was an incorrupt sister that nobody knew who she was, or nobody knew about it. I think they knew who she was internally, but it wasn't like a public thing, and it never became public. But that's the kind of thing where we have these incorrupt saints. But a little baby,
Yeah.
who's not even an hour of life to live a virtuous life, who's not of the age of reason, who could not be presumably a canonized saint for the normal reasons. How do we make sense of any of this?
That's, yeah, I've had a few people responding. It's like, well, one, of course, God would do something like that right now at a time culturally where there's question about the dignity and humanity of babies at all. To
Hmm.
see this like witness of God's love for this little baby that did nothing of his own. To me, that was one of the things that I walked away with very early on, was just a deeper appreciation for the sanctity of children, like these little kids, like your tantrum throwing, snot nosed, whining, non-sleeping babies, like, but God loves them. Like they are so pure and so holy and so cherished by him. And so it speaks to just that holiness of children, just because they are his creation. They don't have to do anything uh, to be holy. And
It's really interesting. This is the year of hope, and it's also it really does make sense, the sort of progression of theology that happens over time. Kind of reminds me a little bit too of even the church teachings on suicide developing over time, or at least the practice of having, whether it's Christian burial or what we believe about hell. And with babies, it's like there's this sort of not official teaching, but kind of traditional idea of limbo. It's like there's never really been an official statement on limbo or what that really might be. But it seems like there's this millennial sort of epochal development of deepening understanding of God's mercy that's happening. And I think you're 100% right. Like that's what I read into it. It's like in today's day and age, that's what we're really deepening, is a real understanding of the dignity of the human person. And from conception to natural death, and the ability to really renew our vision and what we see when we look at another person, whether it's a snot-nosed little kid who's throwing a tantrum, or somebody who has, is in a coma, or in a state where they don't have use of their faculties, or somebody who's gotten older beyond the abilities to take care of themselves. All these different Down syndrome, all these different tests of dignity that our culture is constantly being thrust back into. And now we have this really beautiful sign of
One of the
the value of each person.
Yeah, one of the things that was interesting to me, I've just been reading, it's a parenting book, where a journalist was studying different cultures of parenting, and she was talking about the Inuit culture and how they parent with zero anger whatsoever. Like if a parent were to yell at a child for something, it is looked poorly upon for that parent. Like it's a demonstration of the parent's lack of emotional control, not about the child. And as she studied that, came to understand that because the culture first sees the child as good and as of wanting to fit in socially, as wanting to be pleasing to the people around them. And if they're doing something that's not that, it's only because they don't know. And so and comparing that to our Western culture, where we tend to see kids as they're manipulating us, they're pushing our buttons on purpose, there's something wrong with them, there's something wrong with me as a parent, which when we're coming from that attitude, um, gives a lot more room for angry, frustrated responses. And so just like in comparing that to what we see with baby Brian, if we're starting from this place of knowing how good and loved these children are, how does that change how we parent our kids? Just a kind of interesting reflection there on what that could mean, culturally and how we approach our kids.
Yeah, so God can make new things happen, can bring new things in. I was actually I was at the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and looking at a portrait of Saint Francis in ecstasy, and it was when he received the stigmata. And really interesting, weird trivia fact of the stigmata of Saint Francis, that the wounds actually showed up in his hands not as holes, but as protruding sort of clumps of flesh that came out as hardened, what seemed like nails.
Hmm.
And so the stigmata of Francis, he actually had nails physically emerging out of his hands. And there was one account, I know I read it somewhere from like an original Franciscan biographer, that said you could put your thumb and middle finger, like, or forefinger around the hand, so you're touching either side of the nail, and then move it back and forth within the hand as if it's like one solid object that was literally piercing his hand. Now I don't know, I
Yeah.
wasn't there, but point being, like, God does these crazy things. Like, who's to say, okay, well, it's time for an incorrupt baby, even though, it's not about the exemplary life that we need everybody to follow. Although maybe it is to say, to enter into heaven, you must be like a child. And how about, like, yes, my children are in heaven with me. And maybe we can mature out of this place of like a kind of mechanical equation to figure out how babies can be there without a certain baptism with water, and so therefore maybe there's this limbo thing, or maybe there's this or whatever. It's like, how about we actually go past that, we go deeper, and we actually believe in God's mercy and love, which is greater than our conceptualizations and our equations.
Yeah, the whole baptism of desire piece, especially how it applies to infants, has been a topic that has kept coming up over and over.
Hmm.
So the circumstances around Brian's baptism are interesting. When I first asked Mary Pat if he had been baptized, she said, "Yep." A priest came and he was baptized. And then as we were gathering all of this information to be able to share the story with the bishops involved, she went to request a baptismal certificate and found that there was not one filed. which then got them thinking pretty hard about they had requested baptism, but in this like traumatic delivery, they're drowning in grief. They don't ever remember actually talking to a priest. They weren't there to witness the baptism, but had always been under the impression that it happened. And now all of a sudden there was no real evidence that it actually happened. So, after this season of not knowing whether this baptism actually happened or not, then found nursing notes that showed that a Catholic priest did come and was documented that he was baptized 35 minutes after the physician pronounced him dead. Which then brings up some really interesting questions. Our sacraments are for the living. Pastorally, sometimes it is done where if they are there immediately after death and the body is still warm, we don't, and under the argument that we don't know exactly when a soul leaves the body, just in the condition that the soul is still present and can receive the grace, sometimes those baptisms will be done. But it puts us right into a lot of gray zone, like theologically, as to what counts and what doesn't, and how we have that defined. Knowing there's so many families that have lost a baby before they could be baptized. Like in Brian's case, it was a perfectly healthy pregnancy, and they had no indication that there would be a problem until after he was already pronounced dead. So it really didn't have an opportunity to plan for that or to prepare for it. When you consider the number of people that lose babies from conception to shortly after delivery, it's like 25 to 30% of parents will experience that, which means, if you calculate that out to the worldwide Catholic population, we're talking like 350 million people that have been personally affected by the loss of a baby that could not be baptized. And that loss of a baby is such a pivotal moment in the journey of a young adult's life. Like, it puts you face to face with mortality and with suffering and where God is in that, and how are you going to continue your relationship with God in the church after you've experienced such a profound experience of suffering and loss. And so,
young adult meaning like the other kids that are in the situation that know about the situation. Is
well, no, I mean just anybody
or young parents.
Young parents, yeah. I mean that's typically, just for those young parents that have lost any parent, really, wherever in your parenthood it happens. But it's just a pivotal moment in our spirituality and our relationship
it also
with
just
God.
kind of it points to the sort of disintegration of, again, when we move away from a fully integrated head and heart experience of the faith, and we have to go deeper than just these intellectual formulations of things, because then we end up with a lot of inconsistencies. Like, how can we be a pro-life culture and talk about the dignity of the human person at conception when we are not just fully 100% on board with the fact that an in utero miscarriage is a human person who's destined for and made to be in communion with God for eternity, and is is. But that's the necessary conclusion. Like, it doesn't make any sense logically to try to like finagle this equation where, well, because it wasn't the water and the this and the that, and so therefore it doesn't equal out to, the baby is saved. Like, that's not Catholic. So it's not that we become illogical, but that we have to go deeper and sort of letting the mystery of the things that we actually know not fully invite us into an experience, instead of pretending like we have full control over everything through our rational faculties.
Yeah.
And how could we be promoting a culture that's pro-life or even representing the gospel when we are basically proposing a system that is held within man-made controls, or man-figured out controls. So I love these situations because it happened. Like, it's supernatural. So it could be demonic, like maybe there's some evil demonic thing at play. It could be mass hallucination. I guess we could put that on the list, right? It's like, okay, but if you actually take the time to read the webpage, go to babybrian.org, actually look at the details, like it becomes pretty clear to any rational thinking person pretty quickly. This is supernatural. It's in your face. It happened. And maybe we need to let it blow up all our preconceived notions just a little bit. Maybe blow up's too strong of a word. How about just challenge, poke at, maybe unravel just a little bit those tightly knotted up, easy answers that we have to some of these questions, because they're really, really big questions.
Yeah. So it's one of the kind of God moments in the unraveling of this story is one of the priests that I've been working with encouraged me to reach out to Catholic universities to see if there would be a doctoral dissertation on baptism of desire for infants. So actually, before I got that far, I happened to find one it's done. It's Baptism of Desire by Father Anthony Lusvardi. It's a like 400-page, $85 dissertation on baptism of desire, and I was like, I don't know if I'm I don't know if I'm ready to dive into that. But I found a little article then that just described that in his conclusions, he does believe that baptism of desire would be valid for infants of Catholic families who would have had them baptized had the baby lived long enough to be able to do so. And so then I was looking for his information to reach out to him. And ChatGPT has actually been a handy tool for finding contact information for people. So I was asking ChatGPT to help me with that. And then it follows with a little paragraph about Father, Tony Lusvardi spends his summers in Rapid City. So he's this guy that lives in Rome who wrote the dissertation on baptism of desire that's so applicable to this baby, spends his summers in Rapid City, like 10 minutes from my house. Like, you've got to be kidding me. I spent all day doing that. Like,
That's
and so
amazing.
I know. So I did pick it up, and it's actually a relatively, like, it's easy to read and absorb. And he's got some, like, a beautiful whole history of baptism and baptism of desire outlined in this book. And, really one of the base arguments he comes back to is this, like, lex orandi. If we accept infants into the church and into baptism based on the desire of their parents, it would only make sense that same desire is enough to confer the grace on those babies that couldn't make it to the sacrament because they died too soon. And so it's a simple argument, but it makes sense. If my desire is enough for my living child, why would it not be enough for the child who died before I could bring them to the sacrament?
Wow.
I know.
Huge.
I know. It'll be so interesting to see what God does with all of it.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. Definitely really good for, at least for, again, stoking the fire of the questions, having people maybe go deeper and try to understand things that maybe you wouldn't normally think to go research. But this is one of those things that we could all grow in deepening our understanding of the sacraments, of baptism, of original sin. I mean, there's so many pieces here. And what it means to be in the body of Christ and the communion of saints. I mean, so many different pieces here. But it's really beautiful. It sounds like God is doing a lot with you and your yes to continually turn your suffering into grace and put it in his service. So really grateful for your continual yes and your openness to letting him take you on this wild ride.
Yeah, so that's and no matter how that turns out, it's been beautiful to be able to kind of hold that space of just letting God reveal what it is that he wants to do with this story, but still knowing that it's a story of hope either way. So whether it ever means that there's doctrine defined on baptism of desire for infants, or whether it ever means that a cause would be opened for Brian, like, yeah, those would be amazing, amazing things to come of it. And even if there's none of that, it's still a story of hope for parents who have lost babies, and just an affirmation
Yeah.
to them that their babies are in heaven, that they can intercede for them, that they they remain connected to us, that they're there, not so far away, and to grieve with
Mm.
hope just changes the whole process.
Hope is everything. I mean, it really does come down to hope, and hope is possibility. But hope is not, it's not having things laid out in the way that you're being told so that you know it from outside. It's a conviction in the things unseen. And hope has to be given the room to breathe. I was just thinking about a Protestant I was talking to who, she was devout Protestant whose brother committed suicide, and she was devastated. She was so certain that he was in hell because he killed himself. And just speaking to her about the Catholic perspective of the possibility of God's mercy being bigger, and that the possibility that he was not thinking clearly, and this is mortal sin. Is it grave matter? Yes. Is it mortal sin? Not necessarily, because there are those three conditions for mortal sin, which is the separation from God. And it's just kind of like unpacking that for her. I saw hope rekindle in her face. And it also showed me the power of evangelizing in the space of darkness and pain and suffering and despair. And it's like, man, this is what God did for us. Like, this is the whole point of the incarnation. You enter into the situation of total despair with a light of hope. And now you have people willing to follow you, willing to go and join, to sign up for this new thing, whatever this whole incarnation opened up for us. So we have to be very careful to not try to tie up every loose end and make everything so black and white plastic where it's like, I mean, especially when it comes to God's mercy, specifically when it comes to God's mercy, like where can we actually still allow for room to breathe in the mystery and recognize that God's mercy is bigger than our understanding. So just the fact, I love how you said that, no matter what actually happens here, like what is a doctrine going to do? It's like, okay, well, as long as there's a mom and a dad who are both desiring the baptism of the child, and therefore it's like, no, we don't need necessarily another, you know, number of canon law that's going to like add in another page in the book on sacramental theology. How about just like opening ourselves up to this mystery? Maybe we deepen our understanding of theology in the process. Hopefully that does happen. But I think just asking the questions and being open to the mystery itself is already an incredible gift.
Yeah, it's been a neat ride to see what's happening and to watch it unfold and to see how it impacts so many people. Really, the Vatican does have a document on the hope of salvation for unbaptized babies. But that document, without explicitly saying it, seems to be focused on the babies who die who are coming from families who have no intention or desire for their baptism whatsoever.
Mm.
And that's a beautiful thing. Like God's mercy is big, and yes, we have every reason to hope in that mercy for these innocent little babies. Um, but there's something a little nuanced and different about those families who really ardently desire that baptism for their child. They have every
Sure.
intent to bring them up in the faith, and I know families that, like, even if it brings up improved pastoral care around that, like the pastoral response around infant loss is all over the place. Some people get very beautiful pastoral care, and some people feel kind of neglected in that
Mm.
experience. And I know of families who've been denied funeral rites for their babies, or their child can't be buried in a Catholic cemetery because they weren't baptized before they died. And so when you approach this faithful family and tell them, yes, we can trust in God's mercy, but we can't bury your baby in a Catholic cemetery, or we don't have a funeral rite for your baby, which there is actually a funeral rite for unbaptized babies, but I know families whose priests didn't know that, and
Mm.
so that, like, that impacts how you grieve and how you relate to God and how you relate to the church. And so just having that place to say, yes, your desire was enough, and you can trust that your baby is living a full beatific vision with the Lord is meaningful.
And there to intercede for us.
Yeah.
So, which we can even talk about pastoral response. Like we could be developing a deeper Catholic culture and family life of being connected to the communion of saints and recognizing that we've got friends in heaven. And when we open ourselves up to that, they're really there. And we need to deepen our sense of that. Well, I wish we could go on here. There's so many more questions that get opened up than answered here, but I do really hope people will take the opportunity to go check out the website you put together, babybrian.org, as well as lockslegacy.org, which is your work with grieving parents, and also the book, 1,000 Pounds, which you can get on Amazon, get at CatholicPsych.com. A really beautiful, award-winning book. I'm so proud to be a part of that in some very small way, but happy to have you here and can't wait to talk to you again.
Thank you. It was such a gift to be able to share the story. Thank you for letting me come.
All right. God bless you.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the Being Human podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to help us spread the word and hear more, please head over to iTunes, leave us a review, and subscribe, as it really helps us to get our content out to more people. Be sure to listen next time as I take you deeper into what it means to be human. If you want more free content and information about what we do at the Catholic Psych Institute, head on over to CatholicPsych.com. God bless you.